Welcome each and every one of you from different parts of the world to the Laos University with its multimedia program known as Lo'au and the World Scholars. This particular program is called, the Lo'au and World Scholars, and our topic for today, rather, is the safeguarding of our Tongan intangible cultural heritage. And I would like firstly to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land here in Australia, especially the Ngunnawal and the Ngāpuhi tribes here in Canberra, and also the presence of the Crown Prince, Prince Tupu'a Ukalala and his family here in Canberra, as well as the High Commissioner of Tonga for Australia, Her Royal Highness Princess Latupuipeka, and all lineages, all ha'a, and all Tongans from different parts of the world. Also, I would like to welcome our guest speaker for this morning, Professor Dr. Tevita O, known also as Maui-Ta-Va-He-Ako from Brigham Young University in Hawaii. Our topic today, as I mentioned, safeguarding our Tongan intangible. We have tangible and we have intangible, but we're talking about intangible cultural heritage this morning. Without further ado, I'll pass on to Professor Ka'ili to continue, and I will add in and ask questions when necessary. Thank you. Malo Ka'ili.
Malo Pito, Professor Siosiua Lafitani. Wonderful to be here as part of the Lo'au World Scholars program, and happy to be here to talk about this important topic. I also want to express my gratitude and also acknowledge that I'm speaking from Hawaii, and this is the land of the Kanaka Oiwi, the Tangata Ifonua of Hawaii, the Native Hawaiian people. This is their land, and I want to acknowledge that, and important to note of that importance. Also, my respect to the Aboriginal people of Australia, where you are speaking from, Professor Lafitani. Well, today I've decided to discuss an important topic that's very dear to my heart, which is intangible culture. As you know, our United Nations and other Heritage Foundation have divided culture into two categories: one intangible, and the other tangible. Tangible is the one that is material, things that we can actually touch. Intangible are the immaterial elements of culture, and I will give a definition of that shortly. But I think in reality, both tangible and intangible culture or cultural heritage are one, and they are connected. Um, because when you're talking about both elements, they are connected in many different ways. Of course, connected and separated together. So, what I would like to do today is to speak mainly about the United Nations Convention, which was drafted and passed back in 2003. This is the United Nations Convention on Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. And this is an important aspect that I'd like us to spend the time talking about. I'm also teaching right now a class on conservation of intangible culture, and I think this is an important element for us to think about as we're talking about Tonga. So first of all, I want to just quote from the convention, what the purpose of the convention. So as you know, a convention is a binding, a legally binding document. You can think of it as a treaty. You can think of it as a law that is often written by different nations. In this case, it's the United Nations that creates the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. And then, in order for it to be legally binded, it must be ratified by the nation. As far as I know, the convention has been ratified by Tonga, and as far as I know, that it was ratified in Tonga um, in around 2010. So this is an important convention for Tonga, and there have been at least three that I know from the Pacific that are now listed as living heritage or intangible cultural heritage that are recognized by the United Nations, especially the branch of the United Nations called UNESCO, which is the United Nations Education, Scientific, and
Yeah.
Cultural Organization. That was UNESCO's stands for. So in Tonga, it is the Laka Laka that is have been recognized as an intangible cultural heritage. In Samoa is the Ie Samoa or the Ie Tonga, and it's not just the material of it, but the practice, the actual skills to make this. That's the intangible cultural part of it. And then in Vanuatu is the sand drawing. As far as I know, sand drawing is the other one in the Pacific. But let me just begin by talking about the convention and what the purpose of the convention. The purpose of this convention, and I'm quoting here from the 2003 United Nations Convention, is to safeguard the intangible cultural heritage, to ensure respect for the intangible cultural heritage of the communities, groups, and individual concerned, to raise awareness at the local, national, and international levels of the importance of intangible cultural heritage, and ensuring mutual appreciation thereof. And then the last part of the purpose is to provide for international cooperation and assistance. So, safeguarding it requires, raising awareness, but also support from different organizations, both local, national, um, but also including international. So, I want to begin by just asking the question, what is intangible cultural heritage? And I'm going to use the definition here by the convention to begin us. And there are other definitions, but I'd like to start with this one and see how we want to maybe talk about this. And I quote here again from the convention. The intangible cultural heritage means the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith, that communities, groups, and in some cases individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. This intangible cultural heritage, transmitted from generation to generation, is, con- is constantly recreated by communities and groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature, and their history, and provides them with a sense of identity and continuity, thus promoting respect of cultural diversity and human creativity. For the purpose of this convention, consideration will be given solely to the intangible cultural heritage. So this is sort of kind of the beginning to give you a definitions of all the elements. Notice that it's not just the practices, the representation, expression, or knowledge and skills, but any instrument that are associated with this is also part of it. So instrument, objects, artifacts, or even the cultural space that are used for this. Now, the intangible cultural heritage, uh, as I just defined, is manifested in these domains. And so I have this list of the domains that are part of intangible cultural heritage. One, oral traditions and expressions, including language as a vehicle of the intangible cultural heritage. Uh, Performing arts is another one. Social practices, rituals, and festive events. Knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe, and traditional craftsmanship. Yeah. So this is the sort of kind of the area where you can really see the manifestation of cultural heritage. Now, what does it mean to safeguard? I think this is an important topic. So safeguarding, again, I'm reading from the convention, means a measure aimed at ensuring the viability of intangible cultural heritage, including the identification, documentation, research, preservation, protection, promotion, enhancements, transmission, and particularly through the formal and non-formal education, as well as revitalization of various aspects of such heritage. So those are the elements of the intangible cultural heritage. So I hope this definition can give you an idea of what intangible cultural heritage is, and what can we do in Tonga to safeguard this intangible cultural heritage. So some of the things is just I'm going to just list a few things for us right now as we are thinking about this. So first of all, if we start with saying oral tradition, that would be for us talai fonua. Yeah, so talai fonua would be an intangible culture heritage, and everything else that's associated with that tala, um, fananga, all the talanoas, all of those will all be part of intangible cultural heritage, right? So that's the first one. Performing arts is also the other element. So all our faiva, the faiva laka, which is what we have now, but all our different faiva, tau olunga, all the soke, ma'ulu, all of those faivas are all part of intangible cultural heritage, and that's just the faiva that we are known of, but there are many other faivas that we can talk about. Social practices, rituals, and festive events. So, for example, one of our major ritual that we have in Tonga is the Taumafakava. That will be part of intangible cultural heritage, and any other rituals that we have. For example, even rituals such as what we do when we perform certain rituals at a funeral, where people come, bring a holo or a hala. That's also a ritual that is would be part of this cultural heritage. Knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe. So our traditional ecological knowledge, our indigenous knowledge that relates with caring for our environment, caring for nature, but also our indigenous religion, as we talked about our Lotu Mua and Otua of the ancient Tongan religion. All of that would be included in tangible cultural heritage. And then, of course, the last element is traditional craftsmanship. So all the craftsmanship that requires in order to produce art, whether it's carving or even the building of the langi, otulangi in in Moa and other places in Tonga, or even the skills to build a Tongan fale. That is also a part of intangible cultural heritage, and all the other skills that we have in Tonga are all elements of these. Now, the question that I like to raise, and perhaps me and Professor Lafitani can talk about it, is how well are we doing in Tonga as far as safeguarding our Tongan intangible cultural heritage? Um, and that is an important question that I like to raise for us to think about. I want to first of all say, right now, because we do not have a Ministry of Culture in Tonga, which I would like, I mean, this would be something that we need to have in Tonga. Um, so we do not have that part of government support. We have a cultural division within the Ministry of Tourism. They are the ones that are looking after this area. But I think we need a dedicated ministry to it. We also have the Tradition Committee in Tonga. That's another group that works on safeguarding our intangible and tangible cultural heritage. And then, of course, we have churches and so forth. And then we have universities such as Loau University. So my thought is that we losing many of our intangible culture heritage because we haven't create the different organization to support this area. And in the class that I'm teaching right now, which is my Anthropology 440, Conservation of Intangible Culture Heritage, I talk about different ways that we need to do in order to safeguard our, including festival, including different competitions where we can continue to preserve, for example, our music and so things like that. I mean, many of these are safeguarded in the Faikava, in the Kalapu, but there needs to be more work to do in order to safeguard our Tongan intangible culture heritage. So, Professor Laftani, that's where I want to kind of begin our conversation, and perhaps maybe you would like to add a few things to what I've just shared with us as far as Tongan intangible culture heritage.
Yeah. Malo bito Professor Kairi Maui-Ta-Va-He-Ako. I think from what you have unfolded and elaborated, it's very clear. The definitions, the background, the general background of the concept of intangible culture or tangible, both of them, but you have shared, and I think also you included the two definitions of culture. I'd just like to add a few points which I consider so important to what you have talked about. Firstly, I'm grateful for the UNESCO and the United Nations finally, in the past few years, decades or so, for them to take into account seriously our tangible and our intangible culture, especially us from non-Western societies. And I think it's also due to or contributed to the hard and prolonged work of anthropologists, and apart from historians and other fields in humanities and social sciences, but I think in particular social anthropologists, because from what I have picked up from the charter, the UNO charter and UNESCO, the terms they have used, they are terms from the field of anthropology, not from philosophy, not from sociology, but particularly intangible, tangible, and culture, and we should give credit to anthropologists like yourself and others for the hard work, because that's what it's, finally that's what it's counted. The other point that culture evolves or moves in its own pace, in its own way. I think I remember Professor Futahelu talk about the survival and the decomposition of culture. And he was trying to elaborate the fact that some aspects of culture have doomed to decompose for several reasons. He talked about the imbalance of forces that can preserve particular aspects of culture. Some can survive and some will not. And I think with this UN Charter and what you have talked about and what you have been teaching, and what we have been trying to share with the wider island and Moanan and general communities on this multimedia and also in other multimedia programs, that we are trying to help to boost some of the aspects of culture. By nature, they are going to decompose in the sense of futa. And there are some with intrinsic value or strength, they can survive in whatever difficulties or hardships in life. And I think that's how I feel. The good thing that you are doing in anthropology and also in social sciences and humanities in general, and your other works, and also from what we have been doing, and also other scholars and committees that you have mentioned in Tonga, they help, they do help. But you have correctly pointed out that in Tonga, it seems that they take culture or, intangible culture seriously to some extent, but also there is no, as you correctly pointed out, there is no department of culture and arts, which something that should be done. Yeah? I don't remember whether we have done that in Tonga, or culture and arts always a part of tourism, and it's a reflection of the commercial sense of how they see culture as a commercial instrument, either a part of tourism, culture and arts, or part of education. And maybe there's another department where they have culture there with Pulupaki and them. I don't remember which department is that, whether it's still tourism or it's another one. Semistongia is there as well, and Siwalotaki, I don't know which part of which department, I forget which one. But there is no department or portfolio for culture and arts in particular. Kairi, it's a really huge topic. It's one of the most important issues in the kingdom or in any countries. As we have seen here, it's distinguished from education and also from tourism, though they are related. But I'll pass on to you to continue, and I'll come in later. Thank you, Malo.
Yeah, I want to thank you for raising that. I want to raise the question that, the cultural division have been moving from different ministry. Um, it was in the Ministry of Internal Affairs at one time. I remember when I went to Tonga in 2015, and then it was moved from there to the Ministry of Tourism. And I think before it went to Ministry of Internal Affairs, it was in Ministry of Education. So
Mm,
it's been like uh, an adopted child that's been moving from houses to
certainly,
houses, or foster child.
certainly,
It has not been given its value
yeah.
for its own sake
Sake, yeah.
to establish. Many countries around the world have created their own ministry of culture and arts, and they have a minister dedicated to it with their own workers. And I'm not familiar with the politics of Tonga and do not understand why this has not happened. But this is an area that we really do need to have in order for us to progress in our conservation, our safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. And I do agree with your view that the way Tonga see culture is from a commercial commodification perspective. What can we do as far as what kind of money that we can get from selling our culture? In that respect, it doesn't allow us to see culture as an important intrinsic uh, value all on its own without having to tie it to some sort of monetary or commercial elements. And I think I'm hoping that we have a new government. I'm not sure where they're going to be, but this is something for us as Tongan, whether in Tonga or overseas, to raise with our new government that they're forming. Where's their priority as far as this area of culture? Now, one of the reason why, the way that United Nations look at this is that they see culture especially the intangible culture, as something that is very much connected to, the issue of identity. This is something that's also connected to issue of diversity and so forth. So There is definitely an economic dimension to it, but it's not, the main reason why we are trying to preserve these. It
Yeah.
has to do with, the identity of the people, the philosophical meaning of what it means to be Tongan. These are other intrinsic values that are important as far as why the conservation. And the other elements is that I know sometimes anthropologists separate tangible from intangible, but
Intention.
actually the two are always connected.
That's right.
I'll give you a good example because you raised the question about the ha'amonga. We talked about the ha'amonga before. The ha'amonga a Maui motua, or ha'amonga a Maui as we call it, that would be the tangible, the actual stone. That would be the tangible part of that is the tangible culture. But all the history, the story about the ha'amonga, um, the the skills on how to build the ha'amonga, those
Yeah.
are all the intangible elements. So both the tangible and the intangible always go hand in hand in the way that we do this. And oftentimes, sometimes museums will focus only on the tangible. They will take an artifacts and then place it in a museum and add a label to it, but would not know the history, would not know the traditions, the stories about that particular items. And this is where the intangible cultural heritage come in. And in this area, this is why we need to continue to do research and to learn about our intangible cultural heritage because we need that element to go together with the tangible. Now, one more areas that you raised that I think is important. This doesn't mean that culture is frozen. It means that culture continues to change. Cultural heritage. Some people don't like the term intangible cultural heritage and they prefer the term living culture because what is happening is that culture do change. For example, our music, our songs, they do change. They change over time, and so it's okay that intangible cultural heritage change, but we should continue to even find ways to safeguard those changes, right? For example, we can say that the laka laka is a newer form of dance that was perhaps this is based on Futaheru's work that was perhaps built and based on the Me'elau Fola. So even though we don't perform the Me'elau Fola now, and the Laka Laka is the form that we have now, which is a change of that intangible cultural heritage, we still see the value of preserving, conserving, safeguarding that. Yeah. And I like the term safeguarding because safeguarding allows us to deal with the changes because culture is dynamic and culture changes according to the needs of the time or according to the environmental pressures or even interpretive ways that people need to make sense of their new environment. So uh, the intangible culture heritage, at least in the way that the UN define it, takes into account all of these other elements. So what one of the ways of safeguarding it is to transmit it from generation to generation, to pass it on to the next generation, and of course the next generation may add their new variation to it, and then of course that continues on. But these are the elements that I think is important. Now, one other questions that I like to raise for us to talk about is the roles of us in the diaspora in safeguarding our intangible cultural heritage. Because oftentimes people think, oh, this is something that only people in Tonga need to do. No, all of us who are Tongans have a role in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage because in the diaspora we continue to practice our intangible cultural heritage. We do it in our waiaho birthday parties. We do it in our weddings. We do it in our funerals. We do it in our kava groups where people get together and sing songs. When we have a kava ceremony, that's also there. So many of us are practicing the intangible culture outside of Tonga, and we have a role to continue to safeguard it, make sure that we're doing it in the way that is appropriate and conform to the values of the culture. I'm not against changes. Of course, there's could be still be changes, but it is important for us to continue to do this. Before we came in, we were talking about families now facing with funerals and trying to decide who should be the urumotua,
Yeah.
who should be the fahuloa or the mehekitanga.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those elements, the knowledge about deciding who's the urumotua and the fahu, that's intangible culture right there. That knowledge needs to be shared with people. We are beginning to see that the Tongans in the diaspora are harnessing technology like video technology, which is of course a product of science and mathematics, and using it in a way to pass on that part of an intangible culture. I see your program that you're doing. I do my own program. I see that Pasemata V. Taunsila does one with the Pacifica radio, TV and radio. There are others who are using the technology as a way to safeguard it. And as far as documentation, remember that's one of the areas safeguarding them is documentation. As I read earlier, you know, uh, documentation, research, preservation, protection, all of these we can harness the technology that we have today to do this. And then of course identifying them. Another elements of it is identification. But research is a critical component of this. We can't continue to just rely on what we have. We have to improve and research on different elements in order to do this. And we're doing all of this, and I think the economic benefit is a bonus. I don't think that should be the main reason why we're doing this. There is definitely benefits, as we know. Many of our cultural heritage are now taken by different places, different companies, and they're making millions of dollars on it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
just the Disney, when they took the story of Maui and use it for their Disney show. I mean, Disney ended up making millions of dollars. I think it was 500 million that they made from this intangible culture that belongs to us. And then after that, they sold all the um, products that came with it, and they, probably close to maybe $1 billion that they received from it. So there is definitely money in there, but that's not the main reason why we're doing this. We're doing this to safeguard it for our own culture, and then the economic benefit could be just a secondary element to it. Um, in the way that we safeguarding our intangible culture heritage. So I think those are some elements that I like to just to see if you have any other comments on there, Professor Laftani,
Yeah.
to those other area elements of safeguarding Tongan intangible culture.
Yeah. Thank you, Kaeli. Um, Coming back to that point on Tonga, why for so long there is no uh, department for culture and art. And I think you have raised one or two important points with regard to that. That is the coming in and the intrusion of commercial considerations, because with what it has appeared in the, the the cultural value or cultural importance of a particular thing, it depends or is dependent on its commercial considerations. Without taking culture in its uh, moral sense and also in its material or classical sense, to be significant in itself, intrinsically. And because when we look at it, Kaili, whether it's in Tonga or overseas, intangible culture or tangible, or both, as you have elaborated, they are interplay and intertwine all the time. They are important in every aspects of life, and they have infiltrated or penetrated into different ways and departments of life. So it is important in Tonga, for that matter, to have a department on culture and arts. Because when we look to, let's say, the whole of Tonga, we have countless tangible and intangible cultures or cultural aspects intertwined in various and complex ways. We can't escape from it. It's part of us. And in that sense, it should have its own department. But that's our that's how we look at it. But for Tonga itself, and we hope, as you have said, the new government will bring something new or will bring. But it's still very hard for me to see for Tonga to form a department with just culture and arts for various reasons that we have mentioned. The other point is, I think he's a question about us overseas. With us overseas, you have explained that change is part of everything. And there is change for the worse and change for the best. There is change for development and change for change for progress and change for retrogress. And that's what we have been witnessing overseas in the context of culture. The commercialization of culture is okay. The popular culture is okay. But I have observed that they have, those two, for instance, that they have come in and damage some parts of what we call classical culture, or what we call or culture that has been or aspects of culture that has been survived for many years. Of course, there is always change in contents, but more important, if we can see that the form of certain aspects of culture are still surviving. Okay? I think it's our role as educators overseas to talk more of some of the changes or complex changes that have changed culture for the worse, not for the best in the classical sense of culture. For instance, I'll just give you one example, Kairi, before giving back to you. Some people, they call themselves Punake and Pulotu. Almost everyone now is a Punake and a Pulotu. Eh? The question is, do they Punake or Pulotu in the classical sense of Queen Salote? Or they are Punake and Pulotu in the commercial and popular culture, in the sense of commercial and popular culture. Eh? In the past, society recognized and named someone as a Pulotu, not the person as such. Society names someone to be a Pulotu depending on the quality of his work, the classical quality or the classical sense of this work. Today, anyone can name himself a Punake or a Pulotu without any classical sense of culture at all. Eh? And that's a difficult thing that I have tried to come in slowly and talk about it in one of our programs. It's just an example. I mean, we can't, as you correctly explained, we can't stop, and we can't stop changes. They come in their own ways. Eh? But we can come. I think we are the only people, and maybe the Matapura, maybe the traditional committee for Fonua, Talafa Fonua, Tonga. But I see as time goes, no one now speaks out. Eh? No one from the traditional committee, only Pasemata sometimes comes in as legacy from her father, come in to correct and to point out things to people. And now it's a difficult, it's a difficult generation because no one wants to be corrected. When you try to explain things and correct things, people will write back to you and tell every false and every rumors to argue your family, even whatever background if you are an educator or a lawyer, they don't care. Eh? But it's a reflection of a difficult task for us to play in this difficult and more complicated time. I'll give it back to you, Kaeli. I'm not sure whether I'm in the right track with you or I'm talking about something else, but that's it. Yeah, that's what I would like to add in.
No, that's an important aspect of it. And I want to also come back to your point about Tonga and the need for a place, department or ministry, um, because one of the role of a ministry of culture or a department of culture is to head the safeguarding of our tangible, intangible,
That's
of our Tongan
right.
intangible or tangible culture. And right now, because we only have a division, the division doesn't have the manpower or does not have the resources to do that, and therefore the government needs to dedicate a separate area for this. Um, you know, I I hope I don't know. I know with this new government, this is something that as I said, we'll raise with them and see if any of them are interested. And maybe there are people in Tonga who are interested, but just haven't got to that particular point. And then coming back to the role of educators or roles of scholars in safeguarding intangible culture, I agree with you that we have an important role, especially for us who have spent time writing about culture, about Tongan culture. Both yourself and myself, our doctoral dissertation was based on Tongan intangible idea culture. You on Fatongia and mine on Tauhiva-Ha'a. We spend many years researching our topic and thinking about these particular areas, and so we have a Fatongia as scholars to speak out and say, hey, this is where Fatongia, I don't think this uh, direction where Fatongia is going is the correct direction. Perhaps maybe we should think of it doing it this way. And then also for me, as far as Tauhiva or Tauhiva, you know, and of course the two are very much connected, that we use our education, our research as a way to um, give counsel, advice to our Tongan people who are living
That's
outside
right.
of Tonga or even in Tonga on ways to perhaps think about it. Not everyone will accept it, and some people, as you have pointed out, that people will probably say, who are you to come and correct us and so forth. But whether we're talking about the traditional Tonga or talk about Tonga in some of its tufunga or ha'atufunga or ha'afaiva or ha'anima mea, all of them had to gain an education. They had to go through a level of training, education through the ha'a system in order for them to be able to receive that knowledge in that area. And so I I think this is an important area for us, especially I see that many of our youth who are raised in the U.S.
Yeah.
are they seem like they are very hungry for these information. They want to learn more about our Talai Fonua. They want to learn more about our kava ceremony. They want to know more about our faiwa. They want to know the history. They want to know the way to do these things. And so it is our role, our fatongia as scholars, as educator, to show them this is the way that you should do this in these particular way. So I'll give an example. I mean, you gave the example of the punake and the pulotu, and I see new form of faiwa that are coming out. Mixing our traditional performance with some new motions, new choreography that just doesn't seem like it fits, right? Um, it at odd with our form of performance, and maybe that's another area for
Mm,
us to have conversation about.
certainly.
Where can we fuse and combine and works, from a tava perspective. Of course, we're always looking for where can we find harmony or symmetry, and then where can we say, hey, this new move that you are bringing into our dance is asymmetrical, does not fit with our dances, and perhaps maybe rethink about it, to give them some encouragement that there are some our classical Tongan culture, or the refined element of our culture. It took thousands of years to get to that point, right? And we do not want to just give up some of these classical, refined Tongan elements of our culture, especially in our performance or even in our arts. These are elements that needs to be passed on to the next generation. And and then I think what we also need is we need a group of scholars, and maybe this is where the Ministry of Culture can work on, is that if somebody decide they want to change something, they should at least have a group that they can consult with and say, hey, we want to change this element of the kava ceremony. What do you think? You think that this will work or not? And that way people can say, that just doesn't fit with our traditional ways. Perhaps think of other, or maybe they can recommend to them other things that they can do, and that way we have a systematic way of uh, uh, operating and channeling the change in a way that still very much honor our refined knowledge, our refined culture, classical culture that's been passed down for many generations. Because if we do not have that, then everyone is free to do whatever they please, and people will borrow from anything that they like, right? And experiment in ways that all of us will not be happy. And this is the safeguarding part, right? Because the safeguarding is that, yes, we want to make sure that this practice, this ritual, this oral traditions is passed down to the next generation. That this is the elements of safeguarding. So similar to, I guess, what we were talking about language,
Yeah,
making sure that there is a group
certainly.
to think about the changes into our language, the transliterations, and so forth. We also need a similar group for um, uh, I would say directing the safeguarding of our culture, both intangible and intangible. And I think Loau is in a really Loau University is in a good place to do that. Others are in, we have the scholars that can help with that. And then perhaps if we have a Ministry of Culture or a Department of Culture in Tonga with a dedicated minister, they can also help in this particular area. But I also would like to say, if they are going to run a Ministry of Culture, please find people who have been educated in these areas and have training in this area. Because sometimes, this is just me, Professor Lafitani, sometimes I mean, we would never bring anybody to be a minister of finance if they did not take the time to train in those particular area, or a minister of health without education in that area. And I would say culture, arts, humanities, these areas, you can't just bring anybody who study a different discipline to come and head these areas. You need people who have spent years in these areas, and they can work together with our traditional knowledge holder, or matapure, our and some of the punake and so forth. But I think that would be another advice that I would give if we are going to bring somebody to work in these specific area.
Yeah,
I'll
I
pass it on
think,
to you to see if
I
you.
yeah, I think, Kaili, um, you are right. Eh? Um, we need, I mean, we can do things and we can work on what we have talked about in our different universities. Eh? But I feel it's different for us to come together. Eh? Like in the case of language, and that we have we talked about in our last program, we're moving into the direction of solidifying and consolidating, the tufunga, taulanga tufunga layer. You have started, and that's the best forum for us because you have done many works, for the past 11 years or so. And with this, I think it's also, as you explained it clearly, we need the same thing from our side as educators, because the government, the committee talafa fonua, the matapuri, the taui fonua, they are okay, they're doing their own job. But with us, it's different because of the life of education, and its focus is somehow different from the rest. And we need to come effectively and strongly from our side. And I think it will speak our movement of what we going to do, or association, or whatever will speak for itself. Eh? But it's good for us to unfold as a group, as a team, differently. Maybe some people, will like Lo'au, or they like Lo'au, or maybe not. Maybe some people will like you and BYU not. But when we come together, it's going to be different, as we witness in the case of Tongan Research Association. Eh? But I think this is because you have started the Tufunga, Taulanga Tufunga layer, from within Lo'au, you move outside and started the Tufunga Taulanga layer. And now we're talking here within Lo'au and BYU. I think there are things to be run outside from TRA. TRA has its focus. Eh? And I think it's already settled. They have their own pathway. Ours is different. We're trying to deal with complex changes that affected culture, tangible and intangible, in terms of language and also in terms of performing arts. And Nimamea, like in Nimamea and Tufunga. Yeah? Some of our artists, it's our role, unofficial role, in the words of Professor Futahelu, to talk. Some of our Tufunga and Nimamea, they have changed the form and contents of our Tufunga and Nimamea for commercial purposes. It's okay, but it's only us, because we have our focus and our interest is independent from commercial considerations. Only us, we try to see things in their own terms. to see the importance of classical values in our arts, in our tofunga, in our nimamea, in our performing. None of them value that seriously. They value our culture and our arts in their own commercial and personal interest. And we highly respect them for that, but it's not ours. That's not our cup of tea. We have 8 more minutes to go. Kaili, I'll give it back to you to continue and to wind up our talk, Malo.
I wanna raise the problem of market-driven elements of culture. If we only perpetuate or safeguards the elements that is driven by the market, by the demand of the market, that means that the market will determine what is considered to be valuable, and the market is not the place for that.
That's right.
Because they are consumers who may not have the knowledge of why we should safeguard certain elements. And that is why we cannot tie our work to the market. And education, university have been working really hard over the years to try to be independent of the marketplace, especially the commercial. We've seen a commercialization or corporatization of universities over the years, where many universities have moved to only offer majors that have a job that appear that there's a job that is connected with it. But in classical education, where both Atenisi, Lo'au, here in the area where I'm at in anthropology, but in our culture department, also with the area of our Tava, we see knowledge as something to value on its own, intrinsic value.
Yes.
Not because we can get a job with it or because we can change it into something commercial. And so this is why I agree that this is our role as scholars to work in the area of safeguarding our traditional, safeguarding our cultural values in the specific area. And the thing that I also want to sort of bring up is that the work that we're doing here in the diaspora is important as we begin to raise some of this issue with Tonga and with all the people. And collaboration is an important element. I like this idea of collaborating here with us here at UAU, Hawaii, collaborating with Lo'au University, and our colleagues in different other universities, like University of Auckland or Massey University, others that are in University of Otago, USP in Fiji. There are many different universities that have Tongan scholars who are interested in these things, that we can come together to form a group where we can work on these issues. Well, we have started our Tauranga Tupungalea, and we are working on different areas, trying to figure out different ways to translate. I mean, recently the new COVID-19 variant has came out, Omicron, and now we're trying to figure out what the Tonganization of Omicron will be. Is it gonna be?
I saw your post. I saw your post yesterday. I think yesterday or the day before. For me, one of them.
Yesterday.
For me, either one of them will be okay, because they are similar. And talking about the another platform for culture, or combine the two, culture and art, is like a global association, or a global, maybe not association. We don't want to to confuse the whole thing with that we leave it the association for the Tongan Research Association. Maybe Taulanga, or the Tongan name, it's good, Taulanga. Maybe Taulanga, what's the Taulanga Tufungalea and Taulanga Tufungafaiva. Maybe we can combine them to lessen energy and thinking of a new movement. Maybe we combine culture and art in the Taulanga Tufungalea, whatever, or to add in something, and we just use the same platform as a global social movement, and to leave it as like the Taulanga Tufungalea as it is now. It's a social movement, not to make it an association, lead the association for our Tongan Research Association. We just use that, and be part of it. And this is like, as they call, like a task force on language, culture, and art, something like that. And the Tufunga, Taulanga Tufungalea is already a good term, or what we can add in, as I said. But anything else you would like to add, Kaili, to finish up our program? Malo, you can come in.
Yeah, just to thank people for their interest in this topic of safeguarding Tongan intangible culture, and you can search online for the convention, which is the 2003 UN Convention on Safeguarding Intangible Culture. You can just search online for intangible culture, and you will see there the actual wording of the convention and the work that they're doing in different parts of the world to safeguard. And I want to point out that all of us Tongans have a role in safeguarding our intangible and tangible culture.
That's right.
Scholars have roles. Regular folks who are working in other areas have a role. Our government have a role. Our churches have a role. Because we need everyone to work in this particular area because it's important. We noticed that as the world become more globalized, in the world of globalization, people are interested not in becoming all the same, but becoming different. What makes you different? They're interested, as the world become more globalized, there is also a movement towards diversifying and people wanting to show that they identify as something different from the rest of the world. And our tangible intangible culture is one of the ways that shows that we are different, but also shows our own philosophical, our own knowledge, our own vision of what we see in our world. Those are all the elements, and especially the refined knowledge that were created by our ancestors and passed down in many generations, and is now known as the classical culture of Tonga. This is the other elements of culture that is important for us to continue to safeguard. So thank you to everyone who came to our Talanoa today, and we in 2 weeks we'll come back and we'll talk about this topic in Tongan language. But in that, if anybody is interested in reading more about safeguarding, there's a whole section there just on Tonga, on the UNESCO on Tonga and what Tonga is doing to safeguard the tangible culture. You can send it to us, and I'd be happy to send you a link to some of these particular areas. So with that, ofalahiatu to all of you, and malo apito to Lo'au University and their program Lo'au and World Scholars for inviting me to be part of this. Ofalahiatu.
Malo apito Kaili for your time and ideas and contribution, and also both of us would like to whamalo to all of you who have watched and been watching and will be watching this program in the future. Malo apito, malo homo mea mai, kamo mea.